All power to the people.
All power to the people.
That, my friends, is the call to action. That is the reason why we're here this evening. That was the reason why we organized the delegation to Venezuela. We understood that what we have in Venezuela is a process, an effort to build real, authentic, democratic power of the people. So my friends, we have a task before us. We want to talk about what we saw in Venezuela, but we also want to talk about what we need to do here in this space to build alternative power that can put a brake on U.S. intervention, a brake on U.S. imperialism. Now, we have seen the plan unfold. 2015, Barack Obama declared that Venezuela was an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the U.S. Now, we saw we saw the consequence of that. That basically, as a consequence of that declaration, there was an intensification of the efforts to undermine that nation state. That process intensified in 2010 when they artificially devalued the currency. It continued when they persuaded the Saudis to increase oil production that had the effect of reducing income for not only Venezuela but also Russia and Iran. We have talked about already this evening the sanctions, the criminal sanctions imposed on the country, the siege of the economy imposed on the country, not only by the U.S., but their partners in crime also got into it, their friends there in Western Europe. What we refer to from the Black Alliance for Peace as the axis of domination. The U.S., EU, and NATO. So this was the context that we experienced when we got to the country. As Sarah described, we came right in the middle of the cyber attack. We saw the consequence of that attack. But you know what we also saw? We saw a spirit of resistance. We saw people who were and are committed to protecting the integrity of their process. We saw people who were not going to allow themselves to be broken by this criminal attempt to undermine their process and to disrupt their historical process. So we saw the results of criminality, but we also saw the spirit of revolutionary resistance. And that's very, very important. It's very important for us to not only see that, but to come back here and to talk about that. And try to encourage people in this country of their responsibility as citizens of empire.
That's right.
That innocence is to be immoral. You cannot allow yourself to not know what is happening by this state around the world in your name and my name. That is a position that not only has a detrimental impact on people globally, but is having an impact on our ability here to build effective resistance.
That's right. So
we have to talk about this experience, but we also have to put it in context. Now, the question became when we talked about the U.S. or the Obama administration declaring that Venezuela was a extraordinary threat. We all laugh because it's like laughable. But if you think about it, it's understandable. What did Venezuela do to the U.S. to have that position, to have that celebrated position? All they attempted to do was to provide an alternative model of development, an alternative model of democracy, an alternative model of social organization, and to assist other peoples and nations in the Caribbean and Latin America to develop an alternative model. And because of that crime, they became a threat to U.S. interests, because the U.S. interest is to keep people in subjection. Mm-hmm. It is to try to convince the people that there is no alternative to this madness. Mm-hmm. That what we see in the U.S. and Europe is the apex of human development. Mm-hmm. And that we cannot imagine anything beyond this. Right. So any attempt to try to refute that madness is undermined. It's an attempt to destroy it. And that's what they have been doing with Venezuela. They put the economy under siege. They steal the resources. They launch cyber attacks. And then they say to people around the world, look, this is socialism in Venezuela. I mean, there's something psychotic about that. And psychotic in a sense, too, that people are not even making the connections. They hear about the fact that there are sanctions. They have seen that the U.S. is involved in undermining the economy. They have heard stories about the fact that they have blocked food supplies and medicine. But then when Trump and his Democratic supporters say that what we see in Venezuela is a natural consequence of socialism, they're not making the connections. But we have to make those connections. We've got to wake people up. We've got to move people back to a place of rationality. Because right now, irrationality is ruling here in this space, in this society. So our responsibility is to put this in context. The concern with Venezuela is a concern with undermining the progressive advancement of the people. It is about undermining Bolivia. It is about undermining Nicaragua. It's about retargeting Cuba. It's about targeting any attempt on this planet to try to build something different from what we see today. So we've got to understand that we are in fact in a war, that war extends beyond Venezuela, that war is unfolding here in this country. And we are in fact making those connections. We say that the militarism and aggression we see in Venezuela, in Africa, in Asia, is just the flip side of the war being waged here in this country. The domestic army that we refer to as the police that engage in criminal activities, that murder people with impunity, the mass incarceration, the preparations for popular resistance that these domestic army units are engaged in by allowing themselves to be trained by the apartheid state of Israel. All of these things are connected and reflect the war that we are in fact involved in. So again, our responsibility is to in fact tell the story. One way in which we can begin to bring people to a place where we don't allow what the U.S. state is involved in to escape public scrutiny and popular discourse is that in this upcoming electoral arena, this 2020 election that's coming next year, we have got to make this issue of war and militarism a central component of the national discourse.
Yes.
Now, there's certain things that we can do. I'm going to end on this so we can get into Q&As and talk about more details, what we saw and what we need to do. But I think in terms of us making sure that we begin to bring people back to a place where there's a sense of morality, where we make sure that someone that defines themselves as progressive cannot escape taking a definitive position on the issue of war and militarism, we've got to do a few things. We should say that any individual who is attempting to be a candidate, or any individual who is now an elected representative, we must demand that they support efforts to cut the military budget by 50% as a start.
Thank you.
And to reallocate those funds to fund social programs in the areas of housing, education, healthcare, green jobs, public transportation, etc. They must commit to passing resolutions at every level of government to bring U.S. in alignment with international law and the United States and the United Nations Charter, and oppose all arbitrary and illegal U.S. military, economic, and political interventions into the internal affairs of sovereign nations, regardless of political party controlling the office of the presidency. They must promote the closing of the over 800 U.S. foreign military bases and ending of U.S. participation in the white supremacist NATO military structures.
Yep.
They must call for and work to close the U.S. Africa Command,
Yes.
and withdraw all U.S. military personnel from Africa. They must commit to ending the militarization of police forces through the Department of Defense 1033 program that transfers millions of dollars worth of military equipment to local police forces. They must demand that the Department of Justice document and investigate all instances of use of lethal force against non-white populations as demanded by various human rights treaty monitoring bodies. And they must advocate that the U.S. adhere to the United Nations resolution of July 2017 to eliminate all nuclear weapons globally. This is how we begin to move toward providing real concrete solidarity to the masses of people who are engaged in revolutionary processes across this world. We've got to make sure that the state and its activities is blocked by the people. We've got to, in fact, build popular power. We've got to move from the slogan of power to the people to a reality. So my friends, that's our task, that's our responsibility when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to Haiti, when it comes to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Our responsibility is to oppose and to fight U.S. imperialism until it's defeated.
Thank you, Will.